In the 1990s, British truck stops weren't just places to grab a bacon bap and a cup of instant coffee. They were battlegrounds, not with fists, but with chrome grills, revving engines, and heated arguments over which name ruled the road, Scania or Volvo. It wasn't a casual debate, it was tribal. You either rolled with the V8 roar of a Scania 143M, or you swore by the bulletproof comfort of a Volvo F12. There was no in between. Two truck brands, two different kinds of power, and an entire generation of drivers caught in the middle. These weren't faceless machines. Each lorry had its own character, its own way of moving, breathing, and handling the brutal demands of British haulage. When a Scania 5.8 rumbled into the yard, you knew it. That deep-chested growl, that almost arrogant stance on the tarmac. It wasn't built to be subtle. It was built to dominate. The 143M was Scania's crown jewel of the 90s. A cab-over beast with up to 500 horsepower and enough torque to tow a small town if you let it. Drivers who got the keys to one didn't just feel powerful, they felt invincible. But then came Volvo, smooth, refined, quiet. The F12 was a machine that didn't need to shout. It just did everything right. Where the Scania was all brute strength and thunder, the Volvo was finesse and precision. The cab was tighter, quieter. The suspension made rough roads feel like silk. The 12-liter engine didn't growl, it hummed. It didn't care for showing off, it cared about the long game. The F12 could haul day after day, rain or shine, without shaking the fillings out of your teeth. And for a lot of drivers, especially the ones who practically lived in their trucks, that mattered more than horsepower. It wasn't just about how they drove, it was how they made you feel. Scania was the street fighter, Volvo was the technician. One was noise and muscle, the other was calm control. Both had their die-hard fans. Some drivers would rather quit the job than switch brands. They stuck Scania stickers on their lockers, wore Volvo caps to the pub, and argued for hours at Little Chef parking lots over which one had the better ride, the tougher engine, the real legacy. And the competition between the two wasn't just about bragging rights. These trucks were workhorses. They were the backbone of logistics companies like Eddie Stobart, DAFS, and countless independent owner-operators across the UK. A haulier's choice between Scania and Volvo could decide whether a job ran smoothly or bled profit from breakdowns and downtime. Reliability was currency, comfort was morale, and performance, that was survival. Take fuel economy. The Volvo F12's engine tuning gave it the edge on long-haul efficiency. It wasn't uncommon for operators to report better miles per gallon compared to their Scania counterparts, especially when hauling lighter freight, and that quiet, smooth ride meant less driver fatigue, which translated to fewer mistakes and better job retention. Companies noticed. But then again, when it came to raw torque up steep gradients, the Scania 143M would laugh at a hill the Volvo had to think twice about. If you were hauling heavy plant machinery or bulk aggregates across the peaks, Scania had the upper hand. Then there was the build quality. Volvo's Swedish engineering was all about precision. Everything fit, everything clicked. Even after a decade on the road, the cab interior still felt solid. But Scania's cabs were practically bunkers. The 3 Series trucks in particular had a rep for taking punishment and asking for more. The materials inside weren't fancy, but they were tough. Designed for drivers who ate with greasy hands and climbed in wearing steel toes full of gravel. In the eyes of younger drivers breaking into the industry back then, Scania had the edge in cool factor. The V8 badge meant something. It meant power. It meant presence. It meant you had earned your stripes. That red Griffin logo was a badge of honor, but Volvo had the reputation. Ask any fleet manager which truck caused fewer headaches, and more often than not, they'd point to the F12. The Scania had heart, the Volvo had brains. Truck shows in the 90s were ground zero for this rivalry. You'd see polished 143 million lined up next to equally gleaming F12 Globetrotters. Bonnet up, lights on, cabs open like treasure chests. Judges inspected details like airbrushed murals, chrome-plated bumpers, stitched leather seats. But the real judging? That happened at the T-Van. That's where the drivers talked, swapped stories, told the truth. Who'd been towed last week? Who had a turbo blowout halfway through a Leeds run? Who'd made it to Dover without a single rattle in the dash? There's a reason the 90s is still seen as a golden age of British trucking. It wasn't just the lorries, it was the pride behind the wheel, and nothing represented that pride more than choosing your side in the Volvo versus Scania war. It wasn't about brand loyalty, it was about identity. You drove Scania because you wanted to feel the road shake beneath you. You drove Volvo because you wanted to own every mile of it. By the mid-90s, the lines had been drawn. You could tell which side a driver was on the second they stepped out of the cab. Scania guys walked with a bit more swagger, like they just climbed down from a V8 powered throne. Volvo guys moved with quiet confidence, calm, no rush, like they already knew they'd get there first. And if you were stuck at a truck stop overnight, listening in on the banter, it was always the same story told two ways. One side bragged about pulling power, the other about longevity. But this rivalry wasn't all bark. There were real consequences in the yards. Fleet managers had to make tough calls. Do you want a fleet full of attention-grabbing Scanias that cost more up front, or a line of Volvos that quietly just kept doing the job for years? The F12 had a reputation for needing less downtime, less fuss. It didn't burn through brake pads or clutches as fast as the 143M mechanics loved them. Fewer electrical gremlins, easier access under the cab, and Volvo's service network in the UK was strong and expanding fast. But then again, Scania parts weren't cheap, and neither were repairs. But if you treated them right, they paid you back in raw performance. Ask a haulier who ran both, and they'd probably tell you this. The Volvo was the accountant's truck, the one that made financial sense. The Scania was the driver's truck, the one that kept your top man from jumping ship. And that's where this battle really came to life, in the cab. Volvo was doing something different. Their driver-focused design meant better seating, more ergonomic dashboards, quieter cabs, and not just in brochures, in real life. After 10 hours on the M6, Volvo drivers stepped out feeling fresher, less vibration, less noise. That mattered. But if you were a driver, especially in a 143 M450 or 500 V8, you didn't care about the quiet. You wanted to hear that engine. You wanted to feel it rattle through your bones when you hit full torque at the base of a climb. It was addictive, and it wasn't just about power versus comfort. It was about image. A Scania 143M pulling onto the lot looked like it belonged in a truck show, even when covered in road grime. The stance, the design, the brutal confidence of it. Meanwhile, the Volvo F12, especially in Globetrotter spec, had a more refined elegance. It wasn't screaming for attention, it earned it. Subtle curves, a sleek sun visor, and that tall roof sleeper setup gave it an unmistakable silhouette on the horizon. Owner-operators leaned into this. You saw Volvos polished like show cars, gold pinstripes, tidy curtains in the windscreen, spotless alloy tanks. But Scanias, they were decked out like rolling trophies. Light bars, air horns, custom paint, oversized stacks. They weren't just transport, they were moving identity. Drivers lived in them, worked in them, bragged about them. It wasn't uncommon to see a Scania with a mural of the driver's kids on the back of the cab, or a matching trailer painted to look like a dragon's tail. And despite the fanfare, both sides earned their stripes. Scanias were workhorses. The V8s pulled heavy loads through the Scottish Highlands, through snow, sleet, brutal hills, and did it again the next day. Volvos were marathon runners, running food distribution down to the south coast and back, day in, day out, without a hiccup. Not every driver could feel the difference, but the ones who did, they never forgot it. Some stories from the era became trucking folklore. The Scania 143 that outpulled two competitors on a wet Welsh incline with 44 tons on the hook. The Volvo F12 that ran from Manchester to Milan and back twice a week without a breakdown for 5 years. Mechanics who swore the F12's inline 6 was the most reliable diesel lump they ever touched. And old-timers who claimed the Scania's V8 sounded better than a Harley with a megaphone. The real difference? Longevity. By the late 90s, the first wave of F12s was still out there, still pulling, still starting every morning in cold yards without complaint. Scanias too, but many of the early V8s had seen harder lives. More redline runs, more heavy pulls, more stress. You couldn't blame them. They were built to work hard, and that's exactly what they did. Then came the end of the decade. New emissions rules, new tech. The game was changing. Volvo rolled out the FH series. Scania followed with the 4 series. The classics were slowly replaced, but ask any driver who came up in that golden era, and they'll tell you, the battle between the F12 and the 143M was something special.